Hello everyone, welcome back to the Renewed Youth Students YouTube channel. We've been talking through the story of Jonah and really about how people have second chances. And just to give you a little recap, Jonah was called by God to reach out to the people of Nineveh, these evil people with very bad reputations, but Jonah didn't want to do that. He actually ran away from God, even took a boat to try to sail as far as he could. But God caught up to him, and what happened was that a storm came upon Jonah and the people that were with him. They had to throw Jonah overboard, and a fish ended up swallowing him. Jonah then, within the belly of this fish, repented from what is his disobedience towards God, and God gave him this second chance, which is amazing and applies to us that God really gives us a second chance to do the right thing. So when the fish threw up Jonah onto the shore, he went to Nineveh to preach the word. And in chapter 3, verse 4, what it says is that Jonah began by going a day's journey into the city, proclaiming, 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. The Ninevites believed God. A fast was proclaimed, and all of them, from the greatest to the least, put on sackcloths. When Jonah's warning reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. This is the proclamation he issued in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let people or animals, herds or flocks, taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink. But let people and animals be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows, God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened.
So there's a couple of things here. First, Jonah took his second chance, and he actually went to Nineveh to do what God had asked him to do, which in itself is amazing, considering he could have done this a lot sooner and, not been in the belly of a fish for a while. And I'm just saying he probably sank after that. So he probably could have avoided all of that if he had just listened to God the first time. But he actually did it. He told the people exactly what God had wanted him to tell them. And this incredible thing happened where the Ninevites actually believed the message that he said, and they turned back to God. Now, when it says they put on sackcloth and sat in the dust and they don't eat or drink, that is a show that they are in mourning. So when it's as if somebody had died. And this is how they showed respect for people who had died. They don't wear really great clothes. They just wear burlap sacks, basically, and they make themselves really dirty, and they don't eat or drink anything as a way to show that they are in grief, that they are really sorry, that they are really sad that this thing had happened. And so they are all in sackcloth, and the king hears about this mourning, and he issues the proclamation that everybody is going to go into mourning, and that they are going to repent from everything that they've been doing, and they are going to turn back to God. An entire city is turning back to God and repenting for what they had done, and this was known as one of the worst cities in all of that area. And so for all of these people to have this understanding of God's message and to turn back to him is absolutely incredible. It is just a really cool thing because they had been doing such terrible things, and now they're going to stop doing those things and they are going to focus on God. And so this story just goes to show that because Jonah obeyed God got to move in a really huge way, that people got to turn back to him and just focus more on him. And so it's really cool because it wasn't Jonah's job to change people's hearts. His job was simply, he was going to go and say what God had told him to say. And ultimately, whatever happened, happened. Jonah was off the hook at that point, because he had done what God had asked him to do. said nowhere in there, go to Nineveh and change everybody from doing what they're doing. No, Jonah's job was to go and just say what God had told him to say, and he did that. So we have to remember that when God gives us tasks to do like that, that if we're supposed to go and talk to people about God or anything like that, but that is our only task. Our job isn't to change people. Our job is to be obedient to God and focus on that. And it's God's opportunity to change people. It is God who does change people and transforms people. And he is the only one who has the power to change people. And so our job is only to be obedient to God. And so, like I said, God didn't ask Jonah to change people. He asked Jonah to just obey him. And God asks the same thing of us, to just obey him and let him use us in that way. And so we don't change people. We don't force people to change, but we just simply obey God, and whatever happens, happens. What matters is that we had obeyed God and that we were faithful to God, and everything else is left up to God at that point. And so the key thing here to remember is that God does want to use you, no matter what you've done, no matter how much you've messed up or how far you feel from God. He still wants to use you. And so just allow him to use you, because you can impact people. You may have done everything that Jonah did and ran from God, and God may be asking you to go to a Nineveh of sorts. But remember, everybody in Nineveh repented and turned back to God, even though Jonah had ran away at first. And so God can still use you to impact a great city like Nineveh and have them all turn back to God simply because of obedience to God and nothing more.
Yeah, so it's amazing to both see what Jonah was able to do because of his obedience to God, but it's also amazing to see what happened to the city of Nineveh, who listened to God. Because we're talking about the worst of the worst here. The people who did evil, who were away from God, they actually listened to the message of God and saved themselves. They were on a path towards destruction. And as a city as a whole, as this whole community realizes their mistakes, they were able to change their ways and then save themselves, well, be saved from what was this terrible disaster. So I think just in view of that, if we are Jonah, we might be saving people from their destruction. Or we also can realize what is our own mistakes. Maybe someone else will be a Jonah to us and will point out, well, we're actually going down a wrong path. We should listen to that, those messages that come from God, so that then we can obey and have that second chance and use it in the best way possible. Now, it is an amazing conclusion for this part of the lesson, but the story doesn't just end right there. We're actually going to continue on what happens after God spares the Ninevites.
And so we'll talk about that next week, and we'll see you then.
Yeah, see you.